All right, good evening. The time being 7:05 on February 1st, 2021. Quorum of the planning board being present, call this meeting to order. Just for the record, currently, Mr. Battaglia, Mr. Delaney, and myself are on the meeting. We expect Mr. Ryder to join us shortly, we hope, and Mr. Fowler will not be in attendance this evening. For those watching and wishing to call in on any of the public hearings this evening, the call-in number is 978-771-0819. I'll try to announce that again once we start the public hearing portion, but to get it out of the way up front. So first order of business, we have no minutes this evening, correct? So no minutes. So moving on to agenda item B, committee reports, administrative actions. Do any of the members have any committee reports they wish to make at this time?
All set, Mr. Chairman, on my end.
All right. Mr. Delaney?
All set, thank you.
All right, well, the record will show that Mr. Ryder has joined the meeting, so we now have 4 of the 5 members present. Also, one other reminder, if we could just remind everybody who isn't speaking, if you could mute your computers until it's your turn. That way we don't get any background noise. We appreciate it. Thank you. Moving on to town planners report.
Hi, Mr. Vice Chairman. So there was no town planners report for tonight.
All right. Moving on to agenda item B3, land disturbance permit application fee schedule revision. So we all have the revised list of fees in our packet. See if any of the members have any comments. Mr. Battaglia?
All set, Mr. Chairman, looks fine to me.
Mr. Delaney?
Oh, all right.
There you go. Nope.
I'm set.
All right. Mr. Ryder?
All set, Mr. Johnson.
All right. So I am all set as well. So do we have a motion to adopt the new fee schedule as presented, which I guess I'll read off as less than 1 acre is $250. More than 1 acre up to 10 is 500. I'm sorry. Yeah. 1 acre up to 10 is 500 and more than 10 acres is 750. So do we have a motion on that?
Yeah, Vice Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the new land disturbance fee as written.
All right, I have a
Second.
motion made. Do I have a second? Motion made
Second.
second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Mr. Ryder?
Yes.
Mr. Delaney?
Yes.
Mr. Fratellia?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye as well. Moving on to agenda item B4, 24 Sunny Slope Avenue, bond release and as-built acceptance.
Excuse me, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Yes.
I have to stand down on this vote.
Okay. I don't know what the procedure is for this. When we're in the room, we have to walk out. Like, does Mr. Delaney have to like exit his screen? I'm not really sure how that works.
Go outside in the snow, Mr. Delaney.
All right, you got to go shovel the stairs. We're going to work on this for a second. All right, so if you would just mute yourself and then refrain from making any gestures of any kind while you're there, we can go that way. All right, do we have anybody here for 24 Sunny Slope Ave? All right, hearing no one. We do have a letter in here.
Mr.
the
Chairman, I
text.
think James Hanley is trying to speak, but he's not, his audio isn't coming through.
Yep, still don't hear you, but you definitely seem to be speaking. We'll give you 1 second. All right, well, to the members, while we wait for Mr. Hanley to work with his audio, we do have the letter in here from the town engineer regarding this. Do any of the members have any comments on that while we're waiting on Mr. Hanley?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have reviewed the notes of Mr. Hardeman. I actually went out to the site and reviewed the site as well. The site looks very nice and completed. So my opinion is to vote to approve the bond release as written.
All right, Mr. Ryder, any comments on? gonna say no, but his mute never went away, but he looks like he's.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you go.
There we go. Sorry, I'll agree with Mr. Fattalia. I don't have any other comments. Thank you.
All right, very good. Mr. Hanley, do we have you? No, we do not.
It's not working.
We're probably going to make this real simple because the chair has no problem as well. Mr. Hardiman signing off. So I think we'll go with less is more. And I'll entertain a motion on the release, the bond release and as-built acceptance.
So, Mr. Johnson, I'd like to make a motion to approve the bond release and as-built acceptance at 24 Sunny Slope Avenue.
All right. Ms. McGinty, do we have a dollar amount?
Thought it was
Yeah, yes, Mr. Vice Chair. So the bond was for 10,000.
All right, so 10,000. All right, do I have a second on the motion?
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Mr. Ryder,
Aye.
Mr. Battaglia,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye as well. So we're all set. All right, so Mr. Delaney can come back now. Moving on to agenda item B5, Robbie Terrace Way, bond release and as-built acceptance. I believe we also, in this, we have a letter in the packet. Mr. Cuco, did you want to comment or?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I had corresponded that we met on site with Mr. Hardiman on Thursday. We had a very good meeting. So we're going to continue this indefinitely, and we'll ask to be put on again when we've made some minor adjustments to a couple of the grassy swales out there. So rather than keep it on week after week, we'll just table it and because it's not a public hearing, and we'll let Anna and Alex know when we're ready to go.
All right, so very good. So again, as administrative action, we don't really need to take any action. We'll just pull it off the administrative actions until indicated to put it back on. All right, moving on to agenda item C, 935 Main Street. Site plan special permit, land disturbance permit. Do I have a motion to waive the public reading?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion made and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed? All right, Mr. Ryder,
Aye.
Mr. Battaglia,
Aye.
Mr. Delaney. Mr. Delaney.
Okay, aye.
Aye.
I'm having a problem with my mute and unmute.
That's all
button.
right. The chair votes aye as well. All right, do we have someone here for 935 Main Street?
I'm here, Mr. Chairman, Andy Street, Civil Design Consultants.
All right, anybody else with you this evening?
I'm here also, Michael Saccone.
All right, floor is yours, gentlemen.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Again, Andy Street, Civil Design Consultants. This is a parcel, so we've been before this board and met with a variety of town departments and people at Town Hall over the years here. And most recently presented this in conceptual format back in October, meeting with this board. And then again in October, we had a conceptual IDR with town department heads. So since that time, we've advanced the design. I'm going to share my screen if I can. And we advanced the design, put together the full set of plans, drainage calculations. We've also been before the Conservation Commission. That was back on January 20th. So we've started that process as well. And we're here tonight to show you where we've come to and some of the changes we've made in response to the comments we received thus far. So the parcel itself is about 6.5 acres or so. It's the site of the former Tewksbury Police Station. Yeah, plan. Can you see the plan? Is that sharing okay? You can see the existing conditions plan there with the red. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So this is the site of the former Tewksbury Police Station. The building itself has been torn down, and what's left, really, this red area just kind of shows some of the parking, the 2 curb cuts that came in off of Main Street to access the parcel. For the most part, the buildable area, which is really the left-hand side of the plan is largely disturbed. It's been used for construction related activities. There's been some tree clearing, things like that, and then this pavement either remains or is broken up. The right hand side of the page, the western portion of the site is largely a wetland. The Strongwater Brook, which is an intermittent stream, passes through that wetland, and then there's also the FEMA floodplain and passes through here. So the parcel is in the the commercial zone in the front part of the site, the R40 zone in the rear part of the site, and the whole thing is overlain by the town center overlay, with that floodplain portion on the right-hand side of this plan being in the floodplain overlay district. So where we've gotten to, go down, stop annotating. I'm sorry, I'm on annotation right now. Let's see if I can turn that off. There we go. This is the layout that we have for you tonight. This is largely the same layout that we presented back conceptually in October. The plan is to consolidate the two curb cuts to provide a single curb cut, which gives driveway access to the 9 structures, which are 8 of which will be townhouse style duplexes. The 4 on the left-hand side here, and then the 4 on the right-hand side of the driveway here. So each one of those is a 3-story unit, which is the height requirement for this overlay. Each is a duplex, and then the last building up here is a 2-story building with a office on the first floor, and then the second and third floors will be residential units to make a total of 18 residential units, and then the office space again on the first floor. The applicant has indicated that he's intending to have an office of his own there, so there is a use already in line for that commercial space. In addition to the mixed use development portion of it, part of the land purchase agreement with the town was to provide 20 parking spaces for the Tewksbury Housing Authority, which are shown at the rear of the parcel here, really right on the property line that's shared with the Housing Authority property behind. So those 20 spaces will be dedicated for use by the Housing Authority back there. There's no plans to touch the floodplain overlay, so this is really, we're filing for the special permits under the town center overlay district. Utilities for this, we can go down one, will all extend off of Main Street, or the sewer line, which I'll show in a second, is actually located on the property. As far as grading, stormwater, limits of disturbance, the orange line that you see here, that's our limit of work. So we're really limited to this upland area, and we're working with conservation for the work relative to their jurisdiction. From a stormwater perspective, we're capturing water generated by the site, the roofs, the pavement, some of the landscaped areas in catch basins, and then basically piping underground to the infiltration systems, shown one towards the front and then one towards the back, before ultimately discharging towards the wetland where it kind of more or less goes today. So we're meeting applicable standards both for the as far as this board concerned, but also as far as the DEP and the Conservation Commission is concerned as well. We've kept those outfalls away from necessary setbacks and also above the floodplain there. So we're really trying to limit this project to the upland portion of the site. From a utility perspective, this is one of the unique elements of this particular project. This red line that I've highlighted here is how the sewer actually passes through the site today. So a portion of it comes from the Housing Authority parcel up towards the top of the page. There's a manhole in Summer Street, which is these parcels on the left-hand side of the page, and that sewer runs onto the site as well and kind of forms this U-shaped run here. So 3 of these buildings are located on top of where the sewer is. So in order to allow those buildings and then continue sewer access, we're proposing to relocate the sewer into the driveway and then reconnect it to the existing sewer here. So it's something I'm sure we'll continue to work through with the DPW. We've yet to receive their comments yet, but we'll certainly make sure that all that construction is done in compliance to the town standards. And as I mentioned, water, sewer, gas, those will all come off of Main Street and service each one of those buildings. To allow this development, we are requesting 2 waivers, one of which is a waiver to allow these parking spaces for the housing authority to be within the setback that's required for parking from a property line. Really the intent, we could pull them away, but I think the intent of those spaces is to best serve the housing authority, and getting them as close as possible is desirable and just kind of best. So, but we do want to make sure we request that waiver to allow that. And then the second waiver we're requesting, so these duplexes, according to the parking table, will require 3 spaces per unit. If it was a more, if these were triplexes or a bigger multifamily building, it would only be 2 spaces per unit required, and we're requesting relief to provide only the 2 spaces per unit. And then we do have adequate parking for the commercial space down here as well. Those would be dedicated parking spaces. As far as permitting goes here, it's need the permits mentioned from this board, and then we'll continue working with Conservation Commission towards hopefully an order of conditions there. And then because we're tying into Main Street, doing some work in the right of way, we'll need a highway access permit as well. So kind of moving forward, I guess, with kind of where we stand moving forward, we received comment letters from the fire department, Conservation Commission had that meeting, of course, as I mentioned. Also from town planner, Ms. McGinty, we received her comments late last week. As far as the fire department goes, there was some kind of general comments from the fire code listing some requirements that need to be met, and I believe we do meet all of those related to fire hydrant locations and turn movements and things, and our opinion is we're in a good spot there, but we'll certainly continue to work with the fire department as necessary. We're still waiting on the DPW. I think we do have Ms. McGinty's letter, and we're happy to get into that. The one comment in that letter that I did want to bring up is regarding affordable units. So the applicant is offering 2 affordable units for this development. We have 18 units, and he's offering 2 of those as affordables. It's our interpretation of the zoning that there is no requirement for affordable in the town center overlay. It's specifically called out in the South Village and Community Village and things like that, but not for the town center. But he is willing to offer the 2 affordable units, and also the intention is to have these be rental properties. So with the 2 comes all 18 towards the town's stock of affordable units there. I know Ms. McGinty mentioned in her letter that 3 would be required because of the 15%, which we're happy to continue talking about. Just wanted to kind of offer up our interpretation of the regulations there as well. The last thing I just want to pull up is we do have a landscape plan prepared, which I know has not been submitted. We didn't want to kind of submit too close to this meeting and have a handful of documents floating around out there, but I did want to bring it up and show it to this board just for some kind of general consideration. We'll certainly include it in a formal submission moving forward as well, and we'll do the same with some architectural rendering and things like that to show the look of these buildings. But the general intent here is to have some level of similar look to that of Elaine Estates, which is another project that the applicant has been involved in. So similar type duplexes to that, but we'll certainly provide some more detail and information in future submissions. So I think with that, Mike, if you wanted to chime in at all, certainly feel free, but if not, I'm happy to. We're all here to answer any questions or address any comments the board might have. Thank you.
Yes, hello, this is Mike Ciccone, and Andy, you did a great job. I don't have anything to add at this time, except the renderings are in process. I had hoped to have them, again, for an informal submission by last Friday. They were not completed. So like the landscape plan, we threw it up there so everyone could see it. They know we have it in our possession. I would say that, we'll make a formal submission of the renderings when, at the same time as we make a formal submission on the landscape plan, which will probably be next week. And other than that, I really don't have anything else to add at this time. Looking for input from the board.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. We'll start with Mr. Rada. We have Mr. Rada. All right, well, we start with Mr. Fratelli. Did we lose the people?
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. Fratelli here. Had a little problem with my computer, but I had a number of questions, and hopefully we can get some answers to them. So I guess my first question is, can you explain to me the agreement with the parking in the rear?
Yes, I can explain. Are you asked? Is it okay for me to speak?
Sure. Well, I mean,
Yes, you can respond to questions from one of the board members.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the parking was one of the requirements in the RFP. From day one, that was part of the request for proposals, which was a public offering.
Okay. So the parking, it's by itself, is that a separate entity, or is it part of this project, or how, or who utilizes that parking?
It's going to be utilized by the Tewksbury Housing Authority. There is no fee to park. It was just part of, something that the town wanted in there. They wanted to extend them 20 parking spaces. They're not going to pay anything for it. I have to pay to build it, and that's pretty much it.
So how does the elderly or the housing authority get access to that parking? If you don't mind me asking, Mike.
Well, there's going to have to be a walkway built, and actually, the way the RFP was written, it was the responsibility of the town to facilitate that. However, through the course of several conversations, we've been working on this for many years now. I would also be willing to, if I got permission, because of course it's Tewksbury Housing Authority property, but I'd be more than happy to put a walkway in so that the Tewksbury housing residents could get from their parking spot at the edge of the property line to their residences.
Okay, but in order to access that parking, there's no access from the housing authority land?
No, there isn't, because there's no access on the housing authority side. Actually, it's the back of dwellings and the Tewksbury Housing Authority, and the parking is in the front of all those units. There is no drivable area in the back of those units.
So in order for the Tewksbury Housing Authority to utilize them, they have to drive into 935 Main Street, park, and then cross over, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, actually, walking through the, it's like a property line between two of the buildings. I'm not sure how to best explain it to you, but on Tewksbury Housing Authority property.
Okay. So another question regarding the parking. Do you foresee anybody from 935 Main Street rental units parking there?
No, it'll be prohibited. It'll be well signed that, for Tewksbury Housing Authority residents only. That was part of the RFP from day one.
Okay. So you don't see anybody else using that at all, or using parking at visitors, or unaware of the signage or anything?
I do not. I mean, it will be well signed and it'll be enforced the same as, any other parking violation would be enforced on the property.
I just find
If
that
I can
hard to really figure on a resident or a visitor coming into that area looking for a parking spot. I mean, if you can't park somewhere else, he's going to park there, Mike. I think so.
I believe it could happen. I'm not, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting here saying that it couldn't happen. But again, we're complying with a request from the town, which was part of the original RFP.
Okay. All right. Another question I had is, I had a call from somebody regarding the cutting of the trees down. Was that?
Yes.
Was that permitted before the plan came into effect, or how was that permitted?
I'm sorry, I don't understand. I got permission to cut the trees.
From the town of Tewksbury?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Another question I had while I have you here is, this is probably for Mr. Street, but on the plans, Mr. Street, you have the location of the mail receptacles.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Now, how does that process work? Does that go in front of the postmaster first and then get approved and then to us, or?
Well, you know, we've done several of these projects with the mailbox at this point. You know, it's kind of evolved on our end a little bit. I mean, I think my intent here was to acknowledge that there will need to be that community mailbox, and then if there's any feedback from this board or anything that might have changed the layout, you know, things can happen at least this early in the stage. But once we got to a certain point, it would certainly be coordinated with the postmaster and signed off as far as location goes. So right now, what you're looking at is just, you know, it might make sense, but it's really more of acknowledgement that mailbox will be needed, and we'll kind of take it from there and work with the post office.
Okay.
And I can speak also on my experience at 1390. We did exactly what the post office wanted. They wanted a community mailbox. They consented to the location, and we put it exactly where they wanted it and built exactly what they wanted. And there's been no problems at 1390.
Okay, that's good to hear. So I guess, Mr. Street, is what happens if in the event that they don't like that location? Is there another alternative spot you can put it?
Yeah, I think we have several options, and I think, you know, we've had a pretty good working relationship with them too, trying to figure it out as well. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm confident we can find a
Okay.
suitable location for them.
Great. I'll just, one more question, and I'll let my other board members, kick in here a little bit. So you don't have approval for the actual, from the fire department yet, correct?
No, we don't have, no, there was no, we do not have approval, I guess. We got a comment letter with a handful of standards and requirements we need to meet, and we feel like we meet them. So I would expect future correspondence, but, you know, we'll certainly respond to what's in that letter and see what comes next, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, great. All set, Mr. Chairman, for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vitalia. I'm going to go to Mr. Ryder next, but right before I do, just again, a reminder to those who might be wishing to call in. The call-in number is 978-771-0819. If you call in, they'll queue you up until it's the public's turn to talk, and then we'll take you one by one. Mr. Ryder, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. I apologize. I'm having an issue with my computer as well. I don't know. Thank you. Mr. Fatalia brought up a couple of concerns that I had. You're requesting a waiver for parking, and I think it's going to be very difficult to manage parking for these units. They're going to overflow into that spot for the housing authority. I think that will be a little difficult, where you're requesting a waiver and then ultimately have these 20 parking spots at the end of the road that, be honest, no one's going to pay attention to. And policing that on a private, you know, within that area is going to be difficult. So that's something I'm a bit concerned about. How many, in the duplexes, how many bedrooms are in each of those?
2 bedroom.
2 bedroom?
Yes.
Okay. And then what is the intent on the commercial proposed, the mixed use unit? What is intended on that?
We're going to use the office space for overflow. We're running out of room at 1693 as we speak.
Okay, so just one commercial and then the 2 units above?
Correct.
And you are going to yourself, your business is going to maintain presence in that?
That's correct. That MDR Construction and Dargunian Farm as well.
Okay. You know, I too did receive a call in regards to the trees being cleared prior to any approvals. There was a bit of concern of some residents that all the trees are being removed before any project has come forth in front of the planning board. So when did you obtain the approval for the tree removal?
Approximately 3 weeks before the tree removal was done. I can give you a little more background on that also, Mr. Ryder, and that would be that we had generated a pile of excess fill from several Town of Tewksbury water main contracts. And some of that fill is going to be necessary on the site. So that is why I asked for permission to cut the trees down so that we could do a cut and fill and not haul away material that would have to come back to level the site. So it's really, it eliminates, a bunch of trucking once we get the actual project underway. Whatever excess material is left after we do the cut and fill and level it off. If you've seen the site, you can see that towards the back left, it gets a little lower, and there are some lower areas also on the left-hand side of the property that would need to have filled to come up to grade as well. And the foundations are not going to displace enough fill to manage the whole thing. I think about 50% of the pile that's there will be used on site, and the other 50% will go away.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And one other, I'm going to be honest. I understand this went out for an RFP, and I'll be honest. This is one of the last spots on Main Street. I would have liked to have seen it more of a commercial component. It's going to be, difficult to sit here as a board member and see more ultimately apartments in town that, continue to impact the schools, roads, everything. Understanding it is allowed under the regulations, but it is concerning. I think it's an opportunity. It was an opportunity and still potentially an opportunity that being one of the last locations on Main Street, this would have been a nice addition if there was some more of a commercial component to this with the new fire station and the renovations of that intersection and the long-term use of the old fire station. So I just wanted to bring that. That's been a concern that I've heard about over the last few months. I should say last 5 or 6 months since this was brought in front of the planning board. I believe back in October. So I think it's just it's a missed opportunity right at the moment. But like I said, I just wanted to bring that up. One other point, I will agree with Ms. McGinty in terms of the way your interpretation versus the interpretation of the affordable housing units. I believe 3 is the appropriate number, but I think that's something it's worth discussing, as well as I'm concerned about the parking near that snow storage area. So I think that's something that we need to look at as well. But I'm good for now. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Ryder, may I address your comment?
Sure, absolutely. I appreciate that.
You may or may not know, but there's nothing I'd like more than to see that as a 100% commercial site. That was the intent from the beginning. We spent 3 years trying to get some commercial interest there. In the course of those 3 years, not only has there been no commercial interest, we actively searched out some tenants, Starbucks being one of them. Spent 9 months working on Starbucks, never came to fruition, came to a dead end actually. But also in the same period of time, more and more commercial space has become available on Main Street in Tewksbury. And for anyone now that was going to build commercial space in Tewksbury, if you didn't have a tenant in hand, it wouldn't make sense financially. And it wouldn't make sense, I think, as you know, I'm a resident of Tewksbury, for the town as well, just to have more vacant office space on Route 38. So we tried really hard, and I worked together with the former planner and the town of Tewksbury. We really put our heads together for a period of 3.5 years. So this is what, we've come down to in the end to do something with the property. That's
Okay.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murata. Mr. Delaney.
Yeah, I have a few questions to ask. How is the town transferring the title of the property of land to MDR?
Sale of property.
But the deed says it reverts back. If it's not used for town property or town any use for the town, like housing or whatever the case may be, it's supposed to revert back to the state.
Yeah, that's already been resolved. There was a bill signed by the legislature, I think it was back in October of last year, that resolved. That was, I had no involvement at all in that, Mr. Delaney. That was done by the town of Tewksbury directly with the Commonwealth of Mass.
Okay. Now, the next thing is, by not, according to, for what I understand, the property line from the housing authority to the parking lot, there was supposed to be a buffer zone. And you've eliminated the buffer zone completely, which now means that anybody driving into those parking spaces, as a matter of fact, one of the properties almost hit the lot line, and the headlight and the noise for these people, there's nothing to block out the headlights or the noise going in there. I mean, the parking spaces, if people go in and out, the headlights are going to be on and they're going to shine right into the people's bedrooms. You know, I think this site, and this is me talking, this site abuts an R40 residential zone, and we should treat it as we would for any other residential zone, as an abutter. Now, the thing is, the first plan that came through, you were looking for a waiver to keep the parking spaces 5 feet off of the property zone so that there could be some trees or some landscaping done to prevent that. But in this plan here, we don't see it. There's no buffer from there to the housing authority to block out the lights, the noise, or whatever. Which, you know, these are elderly people. And the thing is, as well as what's taken place here, I don't think that was the original intent of what these 20 parking spaces were supposed to be all about. I thought there was supposed to be a buffer strip to protect the noise and the headlight going into the property. That's my opinion. Okay, the next one, well, we haven't got an approval from the fire department yet. I'm not in favor of the waiver, you know, the waiver of the parking spaces, because I know for a fact, when you got visitors or whatever for this amount of units, I don't know how you can label it. I don't know how you can enforce it privately to prevent the people from using those parking spaces. Not that somebody can't sneak in there, I can understand that. But there's got to be a way to market or prevent the use of that parking space other than what it's used for. You know, they have nurses, doctors, housekeepers, Meals on Wheels. All of these different places are going to be using those parking spaces. And I just think that there should be a little bit more thought put into them. Okay, and I think in the very beginning,
We lost, did we lose the sound?
Mr. Delaney, we can't hear you anymore.
Jay, you went to mute again.
Doesn't show mute though on his screen.
No.
All right, we lost Mr. Delaney completely there. My guess is he's probably logging back on. So maybe what I'll do is I'll start mine, and then when Mr. Delaney comes back, we can let him complete whatever he had left afterwards. So for my purposes, some of it's the same as what's already been mentioned. So obviously you're going to have to address some of those issues. There's no point in rehashing them. But a little bit more on the parking, I guess. So the idea for the parking spaces is that they would there be some reason for them to be used potentially 24/7, 365, right? Like this isn't meant to be parking for like people working during the week and not the weekend or anything like that. This is just it's as far as the expectation is that people will be using those spaces every day, each day. Is that right?
Is that question directed towards me, Mr. Vice Chairman?
Anyone on your side that wants
I'd be
to
happy to answer. I'd be happy to answer. And my answer is quite simple, that I would have to revert back to whoever decided to make that part of the RFP 5 years ago, what their intent was, because I never thought of it until this meeting. But it does make sense to me that a cleaning company that's working at Tewksbury Housing Authority could pull in there, that a visitor for Tewksbury Housing Authority could pull in there. I mean, and in my mind, as far as I'm concerned, that'd be okay, because those spaces are designated for the Tewksbury Housing Authority. The parking really is kind of a thorn in the side for me. But again, I'm just doing what was put into the RFP, because that was one of the stipulations. I really don't have a lot of good answers about this parking. I'd be happy to eliminate it.
Right. Well, yes, I'm sure.
And I don't mean that. I don't mean that in a sarcastic way. Please don't take it the wrong way. I have no idea what the intent was of the writer of the RFP.
Right. I mean, I guess for my purposes, I don't know it for a fact, but I have a feeling that somehow this is connected to that resolution that the town ended up with the state. Because I mean, the Tewksbury Housing Authority, though it says Tewksbury Housing Authority, it's not really the town.
I can tell you, Mr. Vice Chairman, it absolutely is not connected to the resolution with the state. The resolution with the state didn't come about until we tried to close on the property. At the time of the RFP, the town of Tewksbury wasn't even aware of the way the Commonwealth of Mass had their fingers in the deed of this property.
Right, but you're saying that you know for sure that the state didn't sign off on it, knowing this was already in the RFP, is what I'm saying.
Absolutely, 100% correct.
So they don't care.
The RFP was put out, responded to, Board of Selectmen voted on it prior to everyone even realizing that the Commonwealth of Mass had dibs on this property.
No, I understand that. What I'm saying is, though, now after the fact, a resolution was reached with the state, you're sure that their thinking did not in any way take into account the fact that there were going to be parking spaces designated for the housing authority.
I will say again, unequivocally, absolutely 100% did not play a role in anything to do with the resolution with the Commonwealth.
All right. Well, I mean, either way, I guess for my purposes, you're having the spaces foisted upon the property. So, I mean, the fact that they might not be ideal and all those things is not really as much a matter of the petitioner as much as it is a matter of it's what the town asked for before offering it to the petitioner.
Correct.
So these things didn't come out of no place. I mean, they're sort of they're being attached to whatever goes on in that property, and I can't imagine these spaces would go anyplace else other than where they're going on the back of the property. Otherwise, they become somewhat pointless for the housing authority. So I mean, I have some sympathy for that. I do, however, agree with Mr. Delaney that some sort of fence or something between where those spaces are and anyone on the other side who might be affected by, the cars pulling in and out, the same way, again, any other resident would be, is something we really do have to address, or at least take into account. I mean, whether you're cutting back on the buffer zone and, maybe the only real difference is whether or not a fence can be put in that would, give that coverage to the other side from, headlights and, whatnot, might be an alternative to, either putting the whole buffer back in or whatever, but probably something's going to have to be looked at. I'm not 100% against the waiver on parking, partly because I know the reason you don't have the more in the back is because of what's being required. Otherwise, you'd have enough room for the spaces on the site. It's just you have to supply a certain amount as part of the deal. I do start to get a little concerned, and I know we have in the past, on these spaces out in the front being whether or not they're too close to the people coming in and out. Really just sort of those first ones, whether or not people can get in and out of those without causing a real problem with the comings and goings right there at the entrance. I don't know what anybody else thinks about it, but I know in some of the other projects we've had that issue, or had issue with that. And obviously another one for me is always the rendering, so that'll be important when we see them. Miss McGinty, could I just have you chime in here, like on our discussion on the affordable units? The petitioner was suggesting that they weren't required and they were offering two. We're using if I'm not mistaken, we're using the rule like we do for all the other overlays to come up with the three, is that right?
Yeah, so this is a multi-family unit. So I will verify this with Steve Sadwick.
Well, no, I
some of
don't
the
think you're
over-
100% wrong. I think what the disconnect might be is that I think that this might be the area where it wasn't originally included. We
Mhm.
put it into the new rewrite. I thought that the board sort of made it known when we were talking about this before that we were going to, under most circumstances, adhere to using the same rule we have for all the other overlay districts, even though it's not official. But at the same time, we're allowed to impose conditions when granting these, especially when there's waivers involved. And I think that's where that might be coming from as well, was the board's, feeling that going forward, because we knew the rule was going to change in the new bylaws, that we were going to basically start using that anyways, even though it wasn't in there. So that might be where that's coming from. But I just wanted to sort of talk it out. But I think that might be right.
So, yes, that's a discussion about the board has had in the past about that policy kind of change. For the town center overlay district in particular, this is the first application that I'm involved in where it's a multifamily project in it. So that's something I will have to verify with Steve on how that was handled in past applications for the current zoning bylaw. In our current zoning bylaw, the certain overlay districts do call out specific affordable housing requirements. So there could be, it's just something that needs to be verified, and I'd like to respond to that at a later date.
Okay. All right. So for my purposes, as of right now, then I'm leaning towards the three that I've mentioned in Ms. McGinty's letter, unless and until we find out something different and or the rest of the board feels a different way. So, and I have a feeling that you're going to find that that's probably where you're going to find most of the folks calling on. So, probably worth sort of trying to figure that in.
May I speak?
You may.
I currently own another project like this in the town of Tewksbury, in the central business district overlay, and there was no requirement for any affordable units, and there are none there.
Right, but and I don't remember, when did we permit it though?
Several years ago, maybe 4 years ago.
Okay, and that's what I'm saying, is that the board, looking at the fact that it's the only overlay district that I think didn't have the requirement built in and all the others did, and knowing that the new revision to the zoning bylaws is going to have it included if and when we ever get around to passing it.
Mm-hmm.
The feeling, I believe at the time, or at a point somewhere between the time your last project was permitted and now, again, it's not an absolute rule because it doesn't appear in the bylaw. But
Right.
At the same time, the part where we get to make, that we can put in requests or requirements in issuing the permit does. So I think that was where we were resting our authority on treating these overlay districts the same as all the others. So, like I said, you can certainly argue the point to all the board and you see where you end up. I'm just saying that I have a feeling that this number may be the most likely that you're going to come up with. But, we'll see where we fall. I mean, I'm just one person, so.
Thank you.
Otherwise, I think, you know, everything else is the kind of stuff that we kind of have to wait around for the answers. We have nothing yet from the town engineer, so obviously, you know, pending getting something in from the town engineer, you know, there's a lot that could possibly come about from when we get our response there. So I guess we'll wait on those. Otherwise, I'm all set. Mr. Delaney, are you back?
I don't think so. Mr. Johnson, if I may,
Mr. Ryder.
yeah, thank you. You know, that was a point on one of my questions, but I didn't want to be very long-winded and let the opportunity for other members speak in terms of the buffer. I would like to see if the applicant can show what the project is going to look like with a buffer included. Mr. Delaney, as well as yourself, brought up a good point in terms of the not only the lights for the development, but also the headlights and everything going into those units. So I would like to see the applicant show what the project would look like with that buffer included.
No, Mr. Ryder, I'm sorry, just my own clarification. When you say buffer, do you mean the required one or
Yes.
some kind of buffer?
I would like to see, you know, I'd like to see the required buffer and then see what they could come up
I'm
for.
trying to.
Can they hear you now?
Yes,
Sorry.
we can.
Hold on a minute. Excuse me, can you hear me now?
We can.
You can
Yes.
hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, I'm back then.
All right.
All right,
Give us 1 second, Mr. Delaney, because Mr. Ryder was in mid-thought.
all right.
Go ahead,
No
Mr.
problem. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Yeah, I would like to see the required, but then also where they're requesting to put it on the property line, a modification, see what the project would look like with both.
So I would agree with Mr. Ryder then, because I understand if maybe the buffer won't really work in total. So, you know, and maybe by showing it, you could show why. But more importantly, then what's the alternative way that you might be able to address some of the concerns? You know, because obviously a fence doesn't take up much space. So, I mean, maybe that's the alternative. But so I agree with Mr. Ryder in that we just see what can be done to address what I think we'll now go back to Mr. Delaney and let him finish his thoughts on. But I think they were in that sort of realm. So, Mr. Delaney, if you had some more stuff,
Yes, I do.
There you go.
I do. You know, I guess I've covered the buffer zone and so forth, but I don't see anything. How is the trash going to be handled in this project?
Private.
Is it going to be held privately? Like, is there a dumpster or?
Yes, privately.
Okay, but I don't see that on the plan anywhere of where the dumpster is going to go.
Andy? Did I?
Typically, we the residential units get picked up by the town. I mean, Mike, if you want to have this be private, then we can certainly work on a dumpster location. And my assumption.
Well,
was
I
the
mean,
commercial
if they do
space
get
would-
picked up by the town, I guess I would prefer they be picked up by the town.
Yeah, and then the commercial space would have to be stored internally, or we could find a space outside. And you know, I figure for an office, it's not a huge amount of trash being generated.
Yeah, for commercial, it's not picked up by the town. So that would have to,
Correct.
it'd have to be a maybe 3 to 5 yard dumpster there for the commercial.
So we can work on that and get something on the plan, Mr. Delaney.
Okay. The next thing, I don't know, in every project that we have had, we've talked about sidewalks. Do you think that we should have a sidewalk at least walking to the mailboxes?
Well, one of the comments was the sidewalks on Main Street, and we
The sidewalk on Main Street isn't going to get them to the mailbox.
Correct. I believe that the mailbox is going to be right off the edge of the parking area. Have we found a location for it yet, Andy?
As of now, we're showing the mailbox towards the rear of the.
Is it on the plans, Andy?
It is.
Yes,
yeah.
it is.
It's towards
yes.
the rear of the site here. But that's to be, we'll coordinate that with the post office as well.
I think that location, I see it right there now, Andy. It's easy access to the mailman.
Correct, yeah.
And they would walk in the pavement to get there. I mean, a sidewalk certainly wouldn't be a big deal, but just another added expense.
um, like I say, you know, we've dealt with all our projects. We have yet to see, you know, I don't see any you know, how does, like I say, shouldn't there be sidewalks at least if the people are walking? It's just something that I think should be looked at and decided upon. Because I haven't heard any of my board members bring up the sidewalks in the property or anything else. And then not to be a smart guy or whatever, but if the project doesn't get approved, where do we put the trees back?
I can't answer that question.
Okay, so the thing is, the trees are cut. Okay, I have heard of complaints. There was nothing put up, fences or anything else. As a matter of fact, some people could actually fall off the sidewalk. So the thing is, the safety portion for elderly people at the back of that project has not been addressed.
There is no sidewalk.
And another thing, I guess, that's hit me too, is if the sidewalks were there, the elderly would be able to use them to walk through the project to get to the bus, the Lowell Transit Authority. So these are the different thoughts that I have in my mind. This whole property originally was going to be for the Housing Authority, from what I understand, and it's not happening. It's not happening the way I think the state intended it. So right now, these are the different things that I am addressing with you, and I'd like to see it done. I'd like to see the buffer added between the parking spaces, and so forth. Now, I think what could happen here is that some of the units might be able to be moved a little bit to get that buffer in, or to do what we have to do to make it a better place for the elderly as well as the new tenants going into the property. And I think that will just about do it for me tonight.
Can I respond, Mr. Delaney?
Yes.
Are you aware that the first almost 2 years, year and 9 months, we spent meeting with the Tewksbury Housing Authority, trying to make it a Tewksbury Housing Authority property, and there was no way that they could do that. And you can verify that with the former planner and the town manager. But I spun my wheels for 2 years trying to make it a Tewksbury Housing Authority property.
Okay, well, you know, at this particular point, Mr. Saccone, I'm putting out my ideas of what I think this project should be. Whether the Housing Authority could handle it or whatever. Your whole thing originally, from the very, very beginning, was the fact that that property was going to give the Housing Authority 20 parking spaces. Now, the 20 parking spaces have become very, very incidental to whatever else is taking place in that project. These are my ideas, and I'd like to see something done a little bit better for the elderly people that are in that project. I mean, it's just not fair to them. All their privacy is gone, and so forth. I just can't see it. And I think the big thing is we should take a look at where we can put a sidewalk so that they can get to the bus stop or something of that nature. The sidewalk should be there.
They used to use that property before to get to the bus.
And believe it or not, you know, I got somebody chirping at me here, but that property before was originally used for the people to walk from one end of that property to get to the bus stop. And now that's gone. So that's where I stand. I think I've used up my time tonight.
Mr. Delaney, I appreciate everything you're saying, and you know, a lot of the things I agree with, but don't lose sight of the fact that the town of Tewksbury decided to put an RFP out and take money from a private developer for the property.
Well, that part I don't know. That part I'm not privy to. But the thing
It's public
is,
information.
the thing is, I've spoke my piece, and we'll see what happens down the road. I'm sure this thing has got to come back to us again, and I hope that some of the things will be taken care of. You have a very, very dense project. It's in a very, very small parcel of land. And I just think that the intent was to also help the elderly people, and I don't see it happening. So that's it for me tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Wade.
Chairman, can I jump in?
You
real
may.
quick?
Yep.
Thank you. We can have, just to kind of hopefully close the loop on this buffer, but we can absolutely show a buffer between that parking and the property line. Those spaces, our intent was to make them as usable as possible with this iteration of the plans for the housing authority. But if the preference of this board in the town is to have some space there with some trees, we can absolutely factor that in. That's not a problem. I just wanted to put that out there that we can absolutely do that. So if you want to go back that direction, that's fine.
What kind of an opening, in that case, Andy, what kind of an opening would you leave for the people to pass through?
Yeah, we would have to figure out some sort of way to connect that sidewalk. But yeah, I think.
And then on the Tewksbury Housing Authority property, what would take place? Because right now there's grass in someone's backyard there.
Right.
Mr. Chairman?
I'm just give me 1 second. I mean, I guess you guys could reach out, but I mean, I feel like we got to be a little careful here because, we can only deal with the four corners here. So how they connect back up to where you end, to me feels like it's a separate problem to what we're dealing with here, because we have no control over the site beyond we don't really have control over it. We have no authority right now to make a decision on property beyond the four corners. So, I think if you do what you're supposed to do and you get it up to the property line, if then they want to work with you for you to continue that on and give you the okays to do so, that's fine. But otherwise, perhaps they're fine with having it be a grass area right up to, where it meets your piece. But I feel like we got to stick to the four corners of what we're dealing with. And beyond that, if you end up with an answer and they're saying, yes, we'd like you to handle it, we're going to give you the okay, et cetera, that's fine. But I don't think we're in a position to either ask you to or demand that you figure out the connection on the opposite of the property line. Okay? So, I mean, if you have that information, that's fine, but I think we have to stick to the four corners of what we're dealing with, and not try to make decisions on property that's not what's before us. That's one. Two, and maybe it'll help solve some of the questions, but can you, in your next submission to us, can you include the RFP information that, basically that you got and then responded to, so that, we have it in our packets basically showing some of why you're doing what you're doing or why you've been asked to do what you're doing on the property. That might help just answer some of the questions that are lingering out there.
Sure.
You guys able to do that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Somebody, I think it was Mr. Ryder. Did you have something?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Well, you touched on one of the points that I was saying. Regardless of what the housing authority decides to do, the applicant is required to put in parking and make access to the parking to the property line. So that's part of the project. So I think we're getting in the weeds here of talking about what the housing authority is going to do and what they're not going to do. One concern I had is Mr. Streeter just stated that he was looking to make the most of the parking. I'm confused in his statement there. How is that? How is he? What is he referring to there? Because you're limited to what you have for space. So how is that saying we're going to get the most out of the parking from the property line to the edge of pavement? I'm confused at that statement that if there is a buffer required, that pushes the entire project towards Main Street. So I'm concerned that the reason, after looking this further and hearing all discussion, that the reason we pushed this to the property line is so we could fit more units on the property. So I'm a bit concerned about that.
Mr. Chairman?
You may.
My intent, and maybe I misspoke a little bit, but my intent was to say that by having the parking as close to the property line shared with the housing authority, that it would be the most usable for the housing authority, just from a distance perspective. It's right there, they're hop right over the line, they're on the property. That was my intent there.
Okay.
And we can certainly fit this buffer in. We do have some room we can fit the units in a buffer, I guess, and we can show you a plan to that effect, but it probably would be most advantageous to have that discussion with that plan in front of us. So if that's what this board would like to see, we can certainly look into doing that.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Delaney.
as I look at the property, the units that are closest to, say, the housing authority parking spaces, there's a couple of options that could probably be used there. Like, you could either eliminate one unit off of each of the buildings, or you can push the end buildings together and make it 4 units in one and 4 units in the other. There's a way to make this, I think, make this project work. I think the project is a little bit dense, but so that the developer doesn't lose anything, if he squashed the units down, would that be of a help?
Well, let me ask you a question, because maybe I misunderstood what Mr. Street was saying before. But Mr. Street, you can fit the buffer in, and it doesn't mean you have to move the houses to do it, correct?
Oh, there may be some maneuvering of the units, but there's a way to fit the buffer and keep the same unit count, I think is what my point is. So we can fit a buffer and we can move some units around perhaps and leave them the best we can where they are. But yes, we can make all that fit.
Plus, I also feel, may I speak?
Yes.
I also feel that, a fence isn't out of the question there either. We never even discussed that. This is, our second iteration of this with the planning board, but certainly a fence is an easy fix. I mean, a buffer, no matter what kind of buffer we put there, it would be years and years before it was dense enough to block headlights. If somebody was concerned with blocking the headlights, we should put a fence up. I would be amenable to that, is what I'm saying, guys.
Well, I think when I said it before, the idea was if you want to show the buffer how it would work, as well as potentially showing the fence and how it would work, and then we could discuss it further as to how much of each there needs to be, is what I'm saying. So maybe a fence all by itself would be enough. I don't know. Maybe a fence with a little bit of buffering, but maybe not the whole thing that's required. I don't know, but I think whatever you show and then we can discuss, we probably make it easier for us to have a more productive discussion once we're seeing something on the plan, which I think is what the members were requesting. Does that make sense?
Mr. Chairman, it's just easier for us, and Andy, you can chime in at any point. I mean, to do a fence and a buffer is overkill, in my opinion. But again, which one would you prefer? We'd be happy to put whichever one you prefer on.
Well, I mean, I won't speak for the other members of the board, but until we kind of see what we're talking about, will you give us, whether it be renderings or some sort of plan to see? I don't know if we can answer that question yet. I don't know. I mean, the other boards maybe the other board members would tell you what their preference is. I'm unsure at this point. I mean, perhaps a fence would be enough. I don't know yet, though, is what I'm saying. So just to do a fence, and then you show me, and I say, well, that's not going to work. That doesn't do you any good, does it?
No,
so,
it does not.
So that's what I mean. So I'm not sure yet, maybe. And maybe the other board members might feel differently. But I think just being able to talk about it with something in front of us helps, because right now we're not saying build a fence yet. We're not telling you to put a buffer in yet. We're saying show us those things so we can discuss them further, I think. So any of the board members feel I'm saying it wrong, let me know.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
Go ahead, Jay, whoever.
Okay, but if you put a fence if we put a fence in there, don't we still need at least a 5-foot buffer for the fence so nobody hits it? Like, you're talking about a fence that's going to be back there. I thought we still needed some type of a buffer with the fence.
Andy?
Yeah, I think, again, we can kind of make any combination of these things work. I mean, we can work with the housing authority, have the fence on their side. We can put a buffer and put the fence on our side. There's a lot of different ways that this could, I think, to Mr. Chairman, your point, we'll put something on paper and maybe that will help facilitate a discussion with some options or one new proposal from the applicant here.
I think it makes the most sense. Plus, more than likely, the next time we'll also have Mr. Fowler back, so we'll have one more voice to sort of chime in as well. All right,
Chairman, I have some comments if I could.
Mr. Fratalia.
Thank you. I've been listening to everybody and it's all good conversation, but a couple things we haven't discussed, and one is the fact that we need a lighting plan going forward. There's going to be lights back in that parking lot as well, so that's going to be an issue, so we need to see that. And the other question is, Mr. Street mentioned earlier about the affordable housing component and that all of them will count. In order for all of them to count, you need 25% affordable, so that would be 5 units. So so that's not going to work as far as notifying the public that all of them will count. I don't think they will. So,
Like,
Okay.
okay.
All right.
that's it
from
for
the
me.
board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. So with that, do we have anybody on the line who wishes to call in?
We have no callers at this point, Mr. Chairman, but we are.
All right, I'll stretch it out for just a moment. So just as a recap, so you guys are going to put together something on the buffer / fence / something in the back section there with the parking. You try to pull together the RFP information with a packet. That way we have that. And you have some of the rest of the questions that some of the board asked to have addressed. We usually only need about 30 seconds to see if anybody's going to call in. So I didn't stall for that long, but it's you don't have anybody calling in, correct?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Mr. Rada.
Yep, thank you. I just wanted to, when you were discussing about a buffer and fences. Personally, I'd like to see a vegetative buffer and understanding the elderly there. I think a vegetative buffer with some sort of elevated mound that blocks both. That would help not only in, as Mr. Fratalia talked about, in the lighting, because this is a commercial component, you'd be required a lighting plan in there. I think that would, along with a vegetative buffer, would give long-term the best coverage for those parcels in the back. And it also, too, we got to understand that is those units there, that's somebody's backyard. So I think giving them some sort of sense of what they had prior with all those pine trees there for the last 30 plus years, I think would be neighborly. So I'd like to see that on as part of the rendering. Thank you.
All right. So we definitely don't have anybody calling in, it would appear. So, Ms. McGinty, what time would this be continued to?
So if the applicant wants to continue it to February 22nd, the next available time is 7:10. And then the following date is March 8th. So
All right. If it were March 8th, what time?
that would be 7:05.
All right. So to the petitioner, do you guys want to be continued to the February 22nd meeting, or do you need till the March 8th meeting?
My preference would be the 22nd, Mr. Chairman.
All right. So with that, do I have a motion to continue this hearing to February 22nd at 7:10?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion made second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, motion carries. Mr. Ryder.
Aye.
Delaney.
Aye.
Mr. Fratelli.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on to agenda item D, 1650 and 1668 Shawshene Street, modification of site plan special permit. Do I have a motion to waive the public reading?
So
So
moved.
moved, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Mr. Fratelli.
Aye.
Mr. Ryder.
Aye.
Mr. Delaney.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well. Do we have someone here for 1650 and 1668?
Mr. Vice Chairman, this is Jim with Civil Design. I'm hoping you can hear me.
I can hear you.
All right.
Have anybody else with you?
Yes, actually, George Malone is here from 1650.
All right, the floor is yours, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you. Essentially, gentlemen, we're here tonight to seek modification of a special permit that was issued in 2000. The only modification we're seeking is basically a authority to allow two owners of the property. The permit was issued in 2000 to accommodate the construction of a second building on the lot. At that time, the entire premises, which is about 228,000 square feet, was owned by one party. The second building was constructed contingent pursuant to the provisions of the special permit. We're seeking authority of the board to basically allow for the special permit to remain intact, no changes whatsoever, but just to authorize the property, the building to have two different owners. In other words, the building one, which is 1650, which comprises lot 4 and a plan which we provided you, is owned by a different party. The second building, which now known as 1668 Shawshene, it comprises lots 25 and 5, would be owned by another party.
All right. Stanley, did you have anything to add?
For the record, Matt Hammer with Lamplex Engineering. I'm here working with Mr. Malonis and Northeast Refrigerated on this project.
Did you have anything to add?
Only that the existing easements that were on the property from the prior approval are still on this property, and there was generally just additional cross easements added when the property at 1650 transacted, so that there was more common easements associated with all the utilities for the new owner of the other building.
All right. Then let's start with Mr. Delaney.
Actually, I really don't have a problem with the project. I just, can you give me a rough idea of like how many trucks will be in and out of there in a daily basis, or how many people work there? That's a pretty tough area up there with traffic in the evening and so forth. And I was just curious if, the amount of trucks coming in and out, that's a pretty busy, like I say, I hate to repeat myself. That's a pretty busy area. I hate to emphasize it, but can you give me some idea of what the traffic study is going to be like for that area?
I think I can answer that question for you. So Mr. Delaney, this site, in the way that the two buildings are being utilized, has not changed since the prior approval. And to my understanding, that there are no traffic issues currently with the current operation of the two buildings. But I think if I was to generally answer your question, it would be approximately 10 to 20 trucks a day at the very most for this facility.
Okay, like I said, I just wanted to get an idea. I just, that's a very, very busy intersection. And it just concerns me, with the trucks and so forth. I mean, the project itself, I don't have a problem with. I just have an idea. I just wanted to get an idea of what the flow would be like and how many people actually are going to be working there to add to it. But other than that, I'm all set, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fratelli.
I'm all set, Mr. Chairman, no problems.
Mr. Ryder.
I'm all set, Mr. Chairman.
All right. The chair is all set as well. So do we have anyone in the audience, or not in the audience, anyone at home on the phone for this?
We have no callers, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so we'll try to stretch it out just a little bit, just to make sure. Just for anyone at home, just as a clarification, nothing on this is changing from our previous approval of the project itself. This is really just a matter of allowing two different owners to own what used to be one bigger project that we approved. All the rules and everything we put in place when we originally approved it remain. They're just the ownership of the two, the 1650 and 1668 would just be different owners. So nothing new is going in there from what was already approved. And I think that probably stretched it out just long enough to make sure no one called in. Am I correct, Brian?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
All right. So with that, what is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to endorse the modification to the site plan.
All right, just, we got to close first, though.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
So
Make a motion to close.
Close the public hearing. A motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Mr. Delaney.
Aye.
Mr. Vitalia.
Aye.
Mr. Ryder.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well. Mr. Vitalia, as to the modification to the site plan special permit.
I'd like to make a motion
there's
to
a
endorse the
waiver.
modification.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we
There
have
is a waiver.
Oh, we have to do the waiver first then. I apologize.
Thank you, Don.
Did I miss it in here? Oh, this is the one on the size of the plans?
Yes, 1/40th scale.
All right. I'll ask the board members. I apologize we didn't discuss, but are the board members all fine with the submission of the what is this, the 130th versus the 140th?
Yes.
I'm all set.
All
Yeah,
right,
I'm all
so
set, Mr. Chairman, yeah.
Mr. Vitale, we'll let you do the waiver for this one.
So I'll make a motion to endorse the waiver or approve the waiver as written. Changing the scale from 1 inch to 30 to 1 inch to 40 or something. Is that correct?
All the way around, but yes,
The other way around.
140 to 130, right?
correct. All right, so I have a motion made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Motion made and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Mr. Ryder,
Aye.
Mr. Delaney,
Aye.
Mr. Vitalia,
Aye.
the chair votes aye as well. I'm sorry, Mr. Vitalia, now back to you.
Okay.
Motion?
My third time never fails, I guess. Motion to endorse the modification to the site plan special permit for 1650 and 1668 Shawshene Street as written.
All right, we have a motion made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Mr. Delaney,
Aye.
Mr. Vitalia,
Aye.
Mr. Ryder,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye as well. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Take care.
So much. Have a nice evening.
All right, moving on to agenda item 13 East Street, site plan special permit continued. We have somebody here for 1913 East Street.
Mr. Chairman, Jim Hanley, Civil Design Consultant.
Mr. Hanley, anybody else with you?
Yeah, Dick Cuco, Woodland Design.
All right, gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Okay. Mr. Vice Chair, I'm going to share my screen if possible.
Very good.
Let's see. Application. Window. Share. Okay, come on. Okay. So we're here really tonight for a status update for 913 Main Street. You probably recall this one from last fall. We came in front of you, and essentially we have an existing commercial use, and what we're looking to do is put a 7,000 square foot building addition on an existing garage. And at the time we came in front of you, it seemed fairly straightforward. And since then, it's kind of evolved a little bit, and it's kind of caused a little bit of a delay. And I'm just trying to explain that. So we have this freestanding garage, and the plan is to come down here with a garage addition over existing pavement. Around the last time that we let's see. Where am I? Around the last time we sat down with you, we were unaware of a wetland that was actually located across the train tracks, on the other side of the train tracks, on the abutting property. Our development is within 100 feet of that wetland, so therefore, what ends up happening is it brings DEP stormwater management regulations into play, and it also brings Conservation Commission's regulations into play. So we spent a couple of revisions back and forth with DPW, really trying to get on the same page. That's really what we've been doing since the last time we were here. Now, a week ago Friday, we got a review letter, and we're in the process of trying to address hopefully the final technical modification for that. And if you have a minute, there's a couple of items in there that I'd kind of like to walk through with you, just to kind of get on the same page. So we received this letter. So this is a review letter dated January 22nd. Basically, I have four things I just kind of want to run by the board in general, get some direction, then we can finish this thing up hopefully and get it back and be in front of you next time for an approval. The first one comes down to a recommendation from DPW that we solicit the abutter for a drainage easement onto their property. We've actually got an existing detention basin that I kind of labeled here. And this pond essentially just discharges over onto the budding MBTA property. It's more clearly shown on the existing conditions plan here. Let's see. But we have a situation where we actually have slightly more impervious surface, but because of some of the provisions that we've made with regard to stormwater, including a subsurface recharge system, and then modifications to the pond itself, we actually have slightly less runoff going onto their property, and it's an existing situation, and they've been notified as an abutter. So I think there's this recommendation by DPW, but obviously I'm hoping you can appreciate the challenge that it would be to try to get something like that in writing from an abutter for a situation that currently already exists. So I'm looking for some feedback on maybe how to move that forward.
Do you want to take them one at a time?
Oh, okay. I can run through the rest. So,
just to follow up on that, Jim, it's been over 35 years that detention basin's been there.
So that's one. Number two is there's been talk about sidewalks. We've got 516 linear feet of frontage that goes along the property. We definitely appreciate the town's effort to provide sidewalks on all of these project frontages. The challenge that we have is that first it's obviously cost. It's a significant cost for a project of this scale in the range of $50,000 to $100,000. But also it impacts drainage on East Street if we were to do that. So we were looking for some feedback on whether or not the board in this particular case would consider allowing for a grass strip between East Street and the sidewalk. We've actually got 10 feet of landscaped area between the existing edge of pavement and the property line. And what that would allow us to do is to put this sidewalk in and not require significant drainage and curbing improvements that really would drive up the cost of this. So that's kind of the next thing. We do have one comment specific to stormwater management. Without really getting into the weeds of this, because the site is previously developed, it's considered a redevelopment project. And because of that, we get certain relief from strict compliance with the regulations. But we have to meet a standard that's considered maximum extent practical. And myself and DPW have I guess, a disagreement on what maximum extent practical would be in this case. So trying to get a sense for who it is that makes that decision. And we'll work with whoever, obviously, to do it. We want to do it. But I just need direction so I understand who I'm answering to as I kind of walk through these pieces. Beyond that, we did get some abutter comments. Try to find that. We've got abutter comments here. We want to make sure that we address them. Specifically, they have to do with noise, trucks, landscaping, hours of operation. And I just wanted to address this on the record that this use is going to be very consistent with what is already out there. The site is already used as a staging area for commercial equipment. They're actually going to have a little bit less area to place those trucks because of the 7,000 square foot garage addition. So just kind of wanted to address this, that hours of operation are going to be the same. The amount of trucks within a relative amount are going to be the same. It's really going to be kind of the same use. We're just going to try to really kind of clean this thing up. And I guess the last thing I'd add is that you had mentioned the last time we were here that you'd like to see some additional landscaping. If you look at sheet C2, we've added 11 junipers, a handful of, 4 junipers, 11 sea green junipers are equivalent, and a handful of cherry trees. So we tried to kind of provide or enhance the existing landscaping. There is some landscaping out there, and the idea is that we'd be able to kind of put the sidewalk off of the edge of pavement close to the landscaping and kind of, green things up or soften things up along that stretch. So those are really the three things that I kind of wanted to try to get some feedback on.
And Mr. Chairman, Dick Duco, in addition, to follow up on what Jim was saying, by putting the sidewalk up against the property line, we don't have to have a sidewalk that is encumbered by power poles. You can see on there, if we put a sidewalk in right up against the edge of pavement, then, the sidewalk, the poles would be right in the middle of the sidewalk. So that's something else that'll help take into consideration. And as far as the hours of operation, we always just like to remind the board that there is an exception when we have a night like tonight where snow, these landscape companies that are in there, they may have to bring their equipment in and out on a storm evening. So I think the board in the past has, when they put into their hours of operation, have a little caveat in there relative to late night operations just to get trucks in and out for snowstorms. So I just didn't want that to go unmentioned. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Keegan. Mr. Ryder, we'll start with you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Hanley, I believe I would have to defer back to Mr. Hardiman on this. I believe even a modification of the property would require, under the new regulations, would require you to notify the abutter and look for approval to discharge onto that property. Even though it's existing for 30 years, that regulation wasn't in effect then. So I believe any discharge onto a abutter's property would require to meet the new regulations.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not familiar with that. Where would that be in whatever standard is coming to your mind?
That would be part of the MS4 requirements that are regulated by the state and ultimately enforced by the town. So that would be considered an outfall. and all of those outfalls are regulated to be tested annually, and it would be required for an abutter to be to meet those new requirements. That's something you'd have to speak to Mr. Hardiman on.
Yeah, so we're actually below the MS4 stormwater threshold, which is 20,000 square feet, I believe. We're
Okay.
close to it, but we're below it. So what we're required to comply with, as far as I'm aware, is the redevelopment standards for DEP stormwater management standards, and then whatever local regulations relative to those standards would be. So I guess that's the question. I'm unfamiliar with why we would need to do that, and I hate to ask for something that I don't really need if I don't need it, and then have that, kind of slow up the process here.
Okay, but I don't believe, I mean, I may stand corrected here, but I believe that falls back to the authority under the Department of Public Works, who's permitted through DEP. I don't believe that we have the authority to waive anything. I would have to do a little more research on that. I wish I had the letter, so I could have kind of did a little bit more research into that prior to the meeting. So, okay. And then there was one, you came in broken up, and maybe it was just me on my end. You were looking for relief on the second article, outside of the sidewalk.
Oh, yeah, so there's because this is redevelopment, we have to comply maximum extent practical. So a formal compliance would require me to remove 44% TSS before it goes into an infiltration basin. This is an existing basin, right? And the only option I have is some sort of hydrodynamic separator, right? Like a storm scepter or something similar to that. In practically speaking, that's really the only option that we have here. So we have a situation where the street sweeping, the hoods and sumps, they remove somewhere about 29 to 30% plus or minus of the required 44. So we'd be looking to invest some $20,000 to try to address that 44%. So the question is, who determines that maximum extent practical? In this case, where this is in front of the planning board and it's not in front of the conservation or the DEP, but I'm getting comments from engineering. I'm not clear on. And again, I'm going to try to address this as best we can with DPW, but looking for further direction from the planning board.
Okay. This will go back. So I'd have to do a little more research on that. I believe it goes back to the understanding we're authorizing this, but I believe jurisdiction goes back to Public Works and the engineering. But I will have to do a little more research on this, and I'll also reach out to Mr. Hardiman.
Okay.
And as far as the sidewalk, I will agree that that area seems a little low there. I was out there last week, seems a little low prior to just getting to the tracks. So you probably will end up with water along the edge of the roadway if there aren't any drainage improvements done there. So what your intent on the sidewalk, do you have a illustration of what you intend on doing there?
No, I don't have an illustration, but I wanted to talk this through. I mean, if you can see the dark heavy line, that's the right of way line. I have the dash line here. That's my edge of pavement line. I have a here over 10 feet on average across this. And then right up against the edge of pavement, I have existing utility poles, right? So the easiest solution is to provide a 5-foot bituminous sidewalk that would basically be up against our right-of-way line and offset from the edge of pavement. And that would allow that roadway to drain as it already does, right? It wouldn't require any additional curbing or stormwater or anything like that. And it would give a 5-foot buffer to any pedestrians traveling on that sidewalk. So that's a little bit different than what we normally do. Usually it's a vertical granite curb and we run the whole way. But in this case, this is something I kind of wanted to ask.
Okay. The only thing I concern is just without having any curbing there and you having grass strip, there's going to be, long-term maintenance on that in terms of plowing. If you can expand that, shrink your picture in, you have that left-hand turn up to Carter Streets. You're going to have, people tend to pass on the right-hand side, and with a grass strip there, that's going to continue to be get worn out without any type of curbing there.
So it would be similar to what's out there now, right?
Ultimately, that's basically what you're going to have right now, but you're not making it any better. But you're ultimately, the intent is to make the project better than we have. I'm just concerned the long-term overall maintenance of that. Who's going to be responsible for that? Is that going to be the parcel to maintain that? Because I think that's a lot for the town to ask.
Well, I think that given the fact that we always have one landscape contractor or another as a tenant in there, I don't think there'll be a problem with the applicant, the condition that he has to maintain, that area from the edge of pavement to the property line. The other thing would be, we're trying to get some nice landscaping in there and don't want to have it in the right of way, because we could pull the sidewalk back onto our property, but then, we don't want to have the shrubbery and the trees out in the right of way. So I think we have no problem with the condition. I think it's almost kind of a given now, but if the conditions, it states that the maintenance of the landscaping has to extend out to the edge of the pavement, that's a condition that we'd be happily to live with.
Okay, I think Mr. Hanley, if you depending upon what you have from the edge of your bituminous sidewalk to edge of roadway, I think a stone, 1 or 2 feet of stone prior to the grass is going to save a lot, and it's going to look much better in the long run.
So you're saying 1 or 2 feet of stone from the edge of the pavement coming in before the grass?
Yeah, that's just my opinion. I think long term, I think it's better year round. You'll have vehicles driving on it. The grass won't last, but I think if you have the stone there, that will help, and it's going to help clean up that area, and also address the concerns of the neighbors in that area as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just my opinion as one member.
Yeah.
And I'll do a little more research, and I'll reach out to Mr. Hardiman on those 2 issues as well.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chairman, I concur with Mr. Ryder as far as a lot of his comments, and again, I defer to Mr. Hardiman to get us some feedback on some of his needs and requirements also on the site. It's a very tricky situation, but we refer to him on a lot of stuff. So again, I will refer to him and see what he says. But another question I have, Mr. Chairman or Mr. Hanley, is how are we with the fire department? Have we got a final approval from them?
We provided a response to they requested a turning plan. We provided that turning plan to them, and I have not heard any additional concerns from them. That was probably 30 days ago or so.
Okay, I had thought the same thing, and I'm reading some of his comments, and I think as a board member, I need him to concur that he approves of these plans, not just on this site, but on other sites, the other projects that we've had. He doesn't seem to give us the final approval that he is okay with the turning radius as presented. So I don't know if we have to do that as a board and request some additional documentation from him, getting his blessing as far as some of these plans. But I would feel a lot better in these cases where him being the resident professional on the requirements of the fire department to give us that okay before we can proceed on some of these plans. So I think we need to address that on our end as well. So hopefully we can get some joint agreement on these plans and his approval. So it just seems like it's missing, and I didn't see it in this paperwork as well. So That's why I asked. So, with that, I mean, I think we need a sidewalk there. We need some nice landscaping there as well. So hopefully we can come to an agreement between all parties and get this resolved so it does look the best in the long run. You know, I know Mr. Cuco said there is a landscaper there now, but who knows if down the road he'll still be there in coming years. So, but with that, I'm all set, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Delaney?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm all set. You know, the landscaping, I guess everybody has stole my thunder. I agree with everything that Mr. Ryder said and what Mr. Fattalia said. I think the project it's a good project. It'll make that area look a lot nicer than what it is right now. So I'm all for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney. Yeah, the only thing I'll say, everything else, I'm fine with the sidewalk resolution, working out that way that we, figure out a way to pull it back so it works. That's fine. On the issues you were kind of looking for some guidance on, the one thing, and obviously I know Mr. Ryder's going to look into it. You guys are going to have to look into it some more just to get a little more clarification. But my thought on it was the fact that, at least on that first one, I believe, where it said that they were recommending. The difference between recommending and requiring feels like it's telling me the answer to the question of whether or not it's completely up to them or not. Because them recommending it as opposed to requiring it makes me feel like if they really wanted it and they could insist on it, they would have just simply said, you have to do it. So I have a feeling there's a possibility that this is going to come back to us to make a decision. So we should probably start to wrap our head around the fact that that may be where we end up. I'm not sure on all the questions again without them all in front of me and anything else. I can't be sure, but that tends to be when we have these that seems to be the difference is when one of the other entities are the ones who are going to control it. They seem to be a little firmer in their language in terms of they're making that decision and it's not up to us. The fact that this was left a little more ambiguous makes me feel like they couldn't insist on it and it may come back to us. But I will wait till our next meeting to find out the answer to that question.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm all set as well. I doubt it, but I will ask. Anybody on the line wishing to speak on 913 East Street?
We have no callers, Mr. Chairman.
I stand stunned, believe me. So I will give it a few moments just to make sure, but I think that it is more than likely going to be that we don't. Am I correct, Mr. Gitti, in this? If we're going for the next meeting, it would be 7:15, and if they're waiting until March 8th, that 7:05 slot is still open. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. So, for the next meeting, it actually is scheduled as 7:20 on our agenda. It's every 10 minutes.
Stop that so that we would be every 5 minutes, so we wouldn't have to take a chance of having to sit around for 10 minutes. No?
We can change that. No, it's the board can modify that. So it's just how Mrs. Louder had put it. So and then for March 8th is 7:05.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd prefer the February meeting if possible.
Okay. So rather than screw with anything this time, and I will leave it up to others to make a final decision. As of right now, the continuation would be to February 22nd at 7:20. Let me just confirm there is no one on the line, correct?
Correct.
All right. So what is the pleasure of the board? We have a motion to continue this to February 22nd at 7:20.
So moved.
We have a motion made.
Second.
Second. Motion made and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, motion carries. Mr. Ryder.
Aye.
Mr. Fattalia. Mr. Fattalia.
Aye.
Mr. Delaney.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Moving on to old business. Do we have any old business that anybody wishes to discuss? Hearing no old business. Any new business that anybody wishes to discuss?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have some old business I'd like to update the board on.
All right.
For the Hilton Hotel,
Yes.
special permit that was approved on North Street, I've been informed by Mr. Sadwick that development's no longer going through. I believe they will be submitting a formal withdrawal, and potentially submitting a new application. I don't have any further details on that, and I will send an email out to the group so Mr. Fowler has an update as well.
All right, very good, thank you. Any other old business? All right, hearing none. Any new business? Also hearing none. Correspondence. I
So,
believe the only one is the one we have in our packet, correct?
yes, Mr. Chairman. So I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention of the email that went out today from Mr. Sadwick on the changes to the Mass General Law for Chapter 40A, the zoning act that was the bill that was signed by the governor. And a hard copy will be going out in your next meeting packets as well.
All right, so I mean, if I understand the short version of that is basically any zoning bylaw that deals with multiple family dwellings, those kind of things, it's shifting down to 50.1% for approval, down from the 2/3. Is that an apt mini summary?
That's a mini bit of it. Yeah, it's a simple majority, so it's no longer a 2/3 vote at town meeting. And in his memo, he does clarify that certain bylaws regarding different types of that housing, some of them will have to be separated out from other zoning changes. So for example, the proposed zoning bylaw, I'm not sure that's how that's going to be handled because it has to be.
Thank God we found a way to make it more difficult.
Yeah. So, but in his memo kind of explains that. So if the board has any questions, please feel free to just reach out to me or Mr. Sadwick, and when we can submit a memo to clarify.
All right, sounds good. I think whatever kind of cheat sheet version of that can be created, that way if questions come up for anybody or it comes up at any point that we have something to just sort of give people the mini version without getting too deep into the weeds, would be great.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one is there was the write-up of our continuation policy that everybody had in their packet.
Yep.
Just again, this reads fine to me. I just want to clarify. I mean, Mr. Ryder, you've seen this.
Yeah.
You're fine with that, I take it?
Yes, absolutely. I reviewed. I think it's, it just keeps the project continuing to linger on and continuation, especially where we are in remote now and people trying to follow projects.
Sounds good. All right. So to me, the only thing it's not that it reads wrong. I just want to clarify like the way I thought of it and see that I feel like everybody else is interpreting it the same way. Is that, we'll do the 2 continuances. We're expecting someone to come in on the 3rd meeting. If we don't get somebody, my feeling was on it that we would do the continuation, but the expectation was that 4th meeting we're ending the hearings on it if they have not responded at that point. Does everybody else sort of read it the same way?
Yes.
I thought we were going to not go to the 4th.
Well, the 4th would be the one where we would, because I feel like at this point, if you get the 2 and we miss the 3rd and they don't come in on the 3rd, it's fine that, because I was really saying it was 3, but I'm fine with reading it this way where we do 2. If you do the 3rd continuance without having heard from someone at that 4th meeting, if we haven't gotten either someone in or that written, advisory as to what's going on, that 4th hearing, the expectation is that we're going to vote to terminate the hearing.
Okay, so if they come in for the 3rd, and they discontinue, then they're out, is what you're saying also.
No, if they come in and tell us why things are continuing on, then we just go along the way we always have, which is we'll continue them as long as we're getting updates. But we're not gonna do these ones where we've gotten into 3, 4, 5, 6 hearings and we know nothing. We have no idea what's
Yeah.
going on.
Oh, no, I understand what you're saying. I'm all for it.
Okay. All right.
All for it.
Excellent. So that's it on correspondence. So with that, accept a motion for adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, hang on one second.
Mr.
Eric,
Fattalia.
did Mr. Fowler speak to you about our new schedule and public meeting notice dates?
He did speak about it, but I didn't get the new.
Okay. Before we approved our dates, he was gonna speak to you about the possibility of making sure all the dates were not in conflict with some of your meetings at your work, that's all.
I did. Okay. I will. I worked with Alex and did check on a lot of those, so I will send those off to Mr. Fowler.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
the board already voted to approve these. These are the approved dates. I just want to clarify that for the public. But we can certainly modify anything. So yeah, Mr. Ryder, please reach out to me and Alex, and we can work on switching dates around. At this point, we would only be able to start changing things from March 22nd due to the public notice. So I just want to make you aware of that. But yeah.
No,
So
I
Eric,
understand.
don't miss any more, Eric. Eric, don't miss any more.
I believe me. Right now is budget season and it's not easy.
I hear you, buddy.
I let everybody know that last meeting that I will not be around for March 8th.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney.
Okay, I'll say it again. March 8th, I will not be here.
All right, thank you. All right, with that, then I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn. Mr.
Adjourn.
Chairman.
All right, a
Second.
motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, motion carries. Mr. Fattalia,
Aye.
Mr. Delaney,
Aye.
Mr. Ryder,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye as well. Good evening. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank
All
you.
Have a good night.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
Night,
Good night.
everyone.